Hello and welcome. My name is Chris Thompson. I'm the chair of the Communications Committee for the Business Law section of the Florida Bar. This video is part of a series of interviews the Communications Committee is conducting with recently appointed Florida judges. If you're interested in further interviews, stay tuned to the weekly BLS newsletter published every Thursday and to the BLS YouTube channel. We will have additional interviews with other judges being published and promoted in the coming weeks. Today, I'm here with the Honorable Grace Robson, a recently appointed bankruptcy judge sitting in the Middle District of Florida, Orlando Division. Judge Robson was appointed to the bench on November 3rd, 2021. Judge Robson, thank you for being here today. And on behalf of the Business Law section of the Florida Bar, congratulations on your appointment to the bankruptcy bench. And as a fellow Orlandoan, welcome to Orlando.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, and thank you for having me on the channel. Nice to meet everyone virtually, and I hope to that I know most of you or a lot of you, and that I look forward to meeting you all someday in the future.
Excellent. Yes, and I hope you get to meet everybody in person soon, but we thought meeting virtually would be a good substitute in the meantime. Well, let's get started with the basics, Judge Robson. Where did you grow up?
Well, I was born in Queens, New York, but grew up mainly in Suffolk County, Long Island, which is a suburb. And if anyone knows Long Island or New York, which I think a lot of Floridians do, if you take the Long Island Expressway out to exit 63, that's where I grew up, basically. So it's also near Stony Brook University.
Excellent. And so how did you wind up in Florida, having grown up in New York?
Well, my undergraduate was in State University of New York at Albany, somewhere cold. And my law school was at Cardozo. And during law school, I studied abroad in London, England. And I met my future husband there, and he's Canadian. And he vowed never to be cold again. And so he had family living in South Florida at the time, and we visited in February, which is obviously a very nice time to be in Florida. And this is before we had children. And we thought, oh, wouldn't it be nice to live somewhere warm, and we can practice because we are not, bound to any one place. And if we don't like it, we can leave. And so we both reached out to headhunters and recruiters, and we both got jobs and moved, and then we've never left.
You stuck around despite the sweltering summers.
It is our home now, yes. It's
Excellent.
better than the alternative, which is shoveling snow and having your eyes frozen shut in the cold. So.
As a Midwesterner, I can agree to that. Who were your role models or heroes growing up?
So I didn't realize it at the time, as most young children probably don't think of it that way, but I would say that my parents were my role models growing up. They owned a small business, and while I was probably not happy about having to work all the time in that, as part of that small business, I did learn, right, the value of hard work, that it's not easy, to make a buck. They taught me basically by leading by example, to be hardworking, to be honest, and to help other people. So those are the things, I learned through example, and, thinking about it as an adult and trying to raise your own children, these are the things that you want your kids to also learn about. And so I am thankful and, appreciative of what they instilled in me.
Absolutely. When you were a kid, what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
So I would say I wanted to be a judge or a scientist. So, which seems kind of, a little bit different, but I was influenced by, criminal justice course I took in high school. I found it very fascinating, and the whole idea of observing how people were treated differently based on circumstances that they necessarily couldn't control, race or financial circumstances, and wanting to be a part of a system that would, is based on treating others equally, other than, facts and circumstances and the law. But, and then the other part is I always enjoyed my science courses and found that fascinating, which I still do. So any kind of nature show or things like that, I do find fascinating. And I kind of thought that maybe I would want to be one of those research scientists that, does studies and comes up with and finds solutions to, problems.
Yeah. Did you have anyone close to you in either the legal or the scientific field?
No, nobody, no. So my family is basically a family of immigrants. So they all came over from Korea in between like the 60s and the 70s and some in the 80s. And so my mom was a registered nurse. So she was, a nurse here. And then my dad basically maybe had the equivalent of a middle school, high school, education, or barely high school, because actually when he left Korea, he was leaving the North because when the communists were coming. So it's kind of a little bit dramatic, but
Yeah.
so he fled, like, and all of his family, like half his family stayed in the North. And then some of them, one or two folks were in the South. And so he kind of found his way, but working odd jobs. But they ended up in the United States and, and met. And so that's kind of how they got here. But back to the question of whether there was a judge or a scientist, the answer is no. I guess the closest thing to science was my mom was a nurse. So.
Got it. So you had some budding interest in the law, or at least being a judge and possibly a scientist. So what did you study in undergraduate school?
So in undergraduate, I majored in psychology, and I thought, I'd maybe should get my doctorate and become, a psychiatrist or a psychologist. But my minor was philosophy. So, so what do you do with that? So I think the law is also a logical conclusion for, the study of, especially now once getting into meeting with clients and everything else, you do see that the psychology is a big part of the law. So.
Yeah. I'm a philosophy major, so I understand the question of what to do with that.
Yes, I mean, I enjoyed it. Though maybe I certainly think it's helpful in analyzing issues and again, analyzing people too. So.
Yeah. So when did you realize you wanted to go to law school?
Well, I wanted to help people, which is again the whole, being a psychologist as well. But I also wanted to use my brain. And so, when thinking about what do I want to do with this, and knowing kind of in the back of my mind, like, oh, I always did want to be a judge or somehow in the system to help people or work with them, right, in the legal system to assist with problems. So, that's one of the areas that I thought that I could best use my skills and enjoy what I was doing.
Right.
And I always thought of the law as a noble profession, so I, would think like, if there was something I wanted to do that I could feel good about myself, that's something being in the law, I thought that would be a good way to capture what I wanted to accomplish.
And were you right?
Yes. I'm sure most judges feel this way, but it is, like the best job in the world, in our little world. I mean, it's not for everyone. I mean, it depends on what what makes you happy, right? Or fulfilling. But to me, I enjoy it because I feel like it gives you the opportunity to rule on issues or think about issues in a way that's without the requirement to kind of advocate for your single position, of a client. Because if your client wants one outcome, there may only be one way to get that. It's, an adversarial system, whereas being a judge, you're just deciding what the right answer should be based upon what's presented to you and in accordance with the law. So to me, that is freeing in a sense, because I can just get to where I'd want to be. And I always like the academic aspect of the law as well.
Yeah. So why bankruptcy law?
Well, I got into bankruptcy when I was during law school. I was, a young lawyer, and I was going back and forth between, do I want to do I thought I wanted to do corporate transactional law, or I wanted to go to court, right? Those are two very different things. And I did talk to a mentor who lived in my building, who was also a law student a couple of years ahead of me. And she's like, oh, well, if you are interested in doing either, you should look into bankruptcy, because in bankruptcy, you get to do both. You get to go to court and you get to do some of the transactional work and deals, in that system. So I was like, oh, okay. So then I clerked at a bankruptcy boutique law firm, and then that was it. So.
And you enjoyed it right out of the gate?
I did. I mean, I guess as a young lawyer or an intern, I didn't get to go to court, but I found it fascinating, that bankruptcy law incorporated, all of these other areas of law, and the transactional side and the litigation side. So you kind of had to do a little bit of everything.
Right. How would you summarize now your career as a bankruptcy attorney?
Well, I would say I'm pretty well-rounded. So I, initially started doing, I actually started doing the mortgage side creditor work, motions for stay relief, representing mortgage lenders. And then I worked for a bigger firm that did corporate debtor work and committee work. And so I got into more of the complex side of bankruptcy, which I enjoyed very much. And then I had my own law firm where I did smaller business cases and individual work. So I got to learn some of the consumer side and the small business side, which, for the people that do it, it's just as much work. If the clients need more assistance, they need more hand-holding. So that was also a good thing to learn, because I was able to get more hands-on experience in depth with the clients and their businesses. Whereas the bigger cases, you have lots of financial advisors, accountants, you have people who have their MBAs running the business, a lot of the time. So you're really focused on the legal aspect and getting the business plan accomplished through the bankruptcy court. But in the smaller cases, you actually kind of get to advise the debtors on their business and how, assist them with restructuring their business. So
right.
in more detail. And then after that, I worked for a boutique bankruptcy firm that kind of did a little bit of everything. And I got to work on small businesses also, as well as do a lot of fiduciary work. So representing bankruptcy trustees and receivers. So I've kind of represented the gamut of players in the bankruptcy realm.
Yeah, sounds like it. What or who inspired you to become a bankruptcy judge? Or is that something that has been a long-term goal of yours?
Well, I did have the idea that I wanted to be a judge when I was a younger person, but that was before knowing what it entailed. But once I, started practicing, I really did enjoy and do enjoy bankruptcy law, and going to bankruptcy court was always a positive experience. For the most, maybe I had one negative experiences or two over 20, year period of time, but one of the things that influenced me was that, number one, I always learned something new, practicing bankruptcy law. And then second, going to court, I always enjoyed the interactions with the other attorneys. The judges were always prepared, civil, and encouraged, and required everyone to, behave in a manner, that was dignified and focus on the merits, as opposed to what I'll call any discourse, like personal jabs, maybe that you could get away with maybe in state court, but certainly that didn't happen in bankruptcy court. So the courts were always focused on the merits, and they were very encouraging of young lawyers. So that to me spoke to me as a young lawyer, and someone who, didn't necessarily feel comfortable at first going into court, because, at first when you're not familiar with either the judges or, even the other people, at least if you knew your case, the judges always appreciated that. And so I always enjoyed going to court and felt it was a positive experience. And even if I didn't win, the experience itself was positive, and I wanted to be a part of that and making that something that I could have an influence on.
Yeah, that's great. How would you describe your nascent judicial philosophy now that you're on the bench?
So I would say to do equity within the bounds of the law, which is probably what a lot of people say, but the bankruptcy court is a court of equity. Although we are bound, by the law, we can't do anything that's, against or not consistent with the bankruptcy code. But if there's a way to help people in a way that is consistent with the law, I would like to do that.
Excellent. And what is one piece of advice you have for attorneys who may someday appear before you in court?
Okay, so I'll give more than one piece of it, I guess. Okay. So initially I was thinking like, okay, well, I can give one piece of advice, but I think there are several things I can say. So sure. Always be courteous to all of the parties, not only your opposing counsel or your client, but the courtroom deputy, the court security officers, anyone that you encounter, I would say, in the court space, inside or outside the court space, I should say. Always be prepared, which probably doesn't, goes without saying. Know and abide by the local rules. I think that will help you just generally. And then try to keep the presentation of your facts and arguments as simple as possible, especially when they're complex, because even though the litigants may have been living it for a period of time, probably a significant period of time if it's complex, the judge is not going to have had that history, and the depth of experience with the case as you have. So to the extent that you can keep the information as easy to digest as possible, I think it'll help you. Excellent tips. Thank you, Judge. We got a lot of freebies there. I only asked for one. Well, so, happy to do whatever I can. Yeah. Well, Judge, if you're up for it, I've got just a few rapid fire questions that are a little more on the lighthearted side. Right. So here we go. What is your favorite bankruptcy code provision or section? Or like your children, do you love them all equally? No, I don't love them all equally, but there's so many sections that it's hard to say, but I would say, let's say section 105. I'm kidding. That's what you should say. Yeah. I do appreciate the definitions in section 101. So I think that's a good guiding post for interpreting a lot of the other provisions. Excellent. What's the last book you read? Well, right now I'm in the process of reading Beloved by Toni Morrison. I know that's not necessarily a new book, but it's certainly probably considered a classic. And so I'm trying to get finished with that in the next couple of months, hopefully. I'm still in the process of reading Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. And so I think it's Jonathan Sykes, who's the president of the Central Florida Business Law Association. And he had asked me a question about what you're reading. And I answered the same way. And I'm like, wow, I guess I haven't made that much progress, but probably like a lot of other people, you're probably reading, if you enjoy it, you're reading a couple of things at the same time. So yeah, I'm the same way. Do you tend to read fiction or nonfiction or both? I would say both. I have been getting more into nonfiction, so some biographies or autobiographies, although typically prior to the past year or two, when I started getting into the nonfiction, I did enjoy fiction a lot more because I wanted an escape, right, from the hard work of being a lawyer. You just wanted kind of a little bit of frivolity, maybe, just something out there and unrealistic. Right. What's the last movie you watched? The last movie I watched was The Batman. So the new version with Robert Pattinson. So I did enjoy it. I'm still digesting it. I'm having a continuing conversation with my family about, the differences between, the style, I guess, of this movie versus the others versus the comic book, which I haven't read any of the comic books, but some of the backstory stuff that is a little bit different in this movie. So.
Right. How do you like to spend your time off the bench?
Off the bench. So I try to read when I can. I do watch movies or, different TV shows. And I do like to cook. And the other side of that, which is the eating. So those are the things and spending time with my kids if they'll let me.
They're teenagers, right?
They're teenagers, yes.
That's not always a given anymore. What bad or trashy TV show will you admit to watching?
Okay, so the one that I'll admit to watching is, which is not the worst, is it's Hell's Kitchen, which is in reruns. Because I don't know that it's currently on, but if it is, like my younger son and I kind of like to watch that. It's Gordon Ramsay is the chef on that show, and but the reason why I call it trashy is because I don't know why I watch it through Peacock, and I guess Peacock is kind of like cable because there's lots of cursing that's not censored. So it's pretty. I'll call it my trashy TV show.
Yep. Fair enough. What's the last concert you attended?
Okay, so embarrassingly enough, it's been so long that I can't remember what it is. Although the last time I was in Europe, I did go. So if you're counting classical music,
Sure. Okay,
so then I did go to the Bach Festival in Winter Park a couple of months ago. So
okay, that counts.
Okay, so then that's the last one that I've attended.
Excellent. When you're on a road trip or a plane ride, you listen to?
So if I'm on a plane ride, since I can listen to things on my own without having to, consult with others or get their permission or, come to a compromise, I'll watch movies or listen to the music that I want to listen to, which will be, probably 80s or 90s. So.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And you mentioned you like to eat, you like to cook. What's your favorite restaurant in Orlando that you found so far?
I'd say Kabuki Sushi on Colonial is my favorite restaurant. The food is always good, the service is good, and they have like a happy hour, so and the food is really good. So I enjoy that. I do like Prado, which is in Winter Park as well.
Great picks. Well, Judge Robson, it's been an honor talking with you today. Thank you so much for taking the time to introduce yourself to the BLS membership, and I'll see you in court.
All right. Thank you so much. Take care.
Thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.